Score a huge election victory in Japan. The Epstein files are back in the news and roiling British politics. A huge Medicaid fraud scandal unfolding in Oregon. We'll have a live report. It is Monday, February 9th. Common sense for the American people. This is Scott Jennings here on Salem, and we start with the news this hour. While you slept, the Japanese held an election and the conservatives rolled to a landslide victory. Seems the populist backlash against elite failure continues to grow around the world. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi took a big risk by calling a snap election, and the bet paid off. She led her party to a thumping in the parliamentary elections and now has a powerful mandate to deepen ties with the United States and to rev up Japan's economy. Takaichi's coalition looks to have won 352 seats out of the 465 in Japan's lower house chamber. That's well over a two-thirds majority, and it is enough to overrule the upper house in their system. Even more important, they have the power now to rewrite the Japanese constitution, which could lead to them abolishing the law against Japanese militarization. That would provide an incredible bulwark of support for the defense of the Pacific against China. This is an enormous amount of power for the Prime Minister and a phenomenal development for the United States of America. Staying overseas, this time with Vice President J.D. Vance, who left the Olympics in Italy and headed to Armenia, where he's strengthening ties with that nation's leadership. Let's hear from the Vice President. Cut 11.
This is one of the oldest Christian countries in the entire world, a true bedrock of Christian civilization and culture. As a devout Christian myself, I know the meaning of this country to the entire world and to the religion that the Prime Minister and I share. So to the people of Armenia and the great Prime Minister, I want to thank you for your partnership. President Trump is committed to this partnership, and so am I, and we're thrilled to be here to take the next step. God bless you.
Vice President Vance meeting with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan about a number of issues today. Up on Capitol Hill, Ghislaine Maxwell showed up in Washington for a deposition today, but the Epstein co-conspirator took the Fifth Amendment in her meeting with the House Oversight Committee. Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky laid out the calendar ahead in this unfolding investigation. Here's Cut 12.
February 26th, we have former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. February 27th, former President Bill Clinton. March 11th, Richard Kahn, Epstein's accountant. And March 19th, Darren Endike, Epstein's lawyer.
Today, lawmakers can review unredacted Epstein files up at the Department of Justice. Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky says he plans to go over and look at them today. I would expect some commentary from the members who do look at the files, although it seems to me at this point the victims themselves, or at least the legislators who claim to know things, should start naming names if they have them. And the Epstein case has rocked the upper levels of British politics. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is under pressure to resign over his role in making Peter Mandelson the British ambassador to the United States, despite Mandelson's close ties to Epstein. We'll keep an eye on the situation. Seems to be evolving rapidly. In fact, Morgan McSweeney, chief of staff to Prime Minister Starmer, has resigned. Checking in on the American economy, the Dow Jones hit 50,000 for the first time on Friday. And today, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett is touting strong economic growth. Let's take a listen to Hassett, Cut 13.
Well, I think that there are two forces that are sort of pushing down and then one force that's pushing up. The force that's pushing up is that GDP growth is through the roof. Even with a revised down GDP now, we're looking at 4% growth into the end of the year, 3% for the year as a whole, despite the fact that we had a really negative first quarter with Joe Biden. And so that's the positive effect. The negative effects are when there's a productivity boom, then maybe you can make the same amount of stuff with fewer workers, and so that might reduce labor demand. And then the other thing is that there's a pretty big decline in the labor force because illegals leaving the country. And so the break-even job number is quite a bit lower than it was under Joe Biden, when there were people, basically coming across the border willy-nilly. And so I think that you should expect slightly smaller job numbers that are consistent with high GDP growth right now. And that one shouldn't panic if you see a sequence of numbers that are lower than you're used to, because, again, population growth is going down and productivity growth is skyrocketing. It's an unusual set of circumstances.
Now, if you cut through the clutter, an emerging story to tell for the White House is forming. Stock market is setting records. The national murder rate is at its lowest since 1900. 0 border crossings for 9 months in a row. And as you can hear from the White House, there is economic growth out there. President Trump has signed a new proclamation to significantly raise imports of Argentinian beef. The move aims to lower the record high price of hamburger meat for American consumers, though the decision is facing fierce pushback from domestic cattle ranchers who say the move will undercut the U.S. industry. This is the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. Don't forget, I, along with Mike Gallagher here at Salem, are inviting you to join us on the unforgettable Gulf of America cruise happening in November of this year. Imagine it. Turquoise waters, white sand beaches, incredible food, and insightful conversations about the future of our country. It'll be just after the elections. We'll have much to discuss. It's Gallagher and it's Jennings, and we are diving into the issues shaping America, even as we dive into the swimming pools on this luxury ship. We will go to some stunning destinations, and we will every day honor the 250th anniversary of our nation. I encourage you to book your cabin today. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. It's a week. It's in November. It'll be beautiful and fun. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningshow.com and click the Gulf of America cruise banner. You have a personal invitation from me to join us on this luxury ship. The search for Savannah Guthrie's mother continues. The family posted a third video on Saturday. Savannah Guthrie in the video offered to pay a ransom and said, quote, "We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace." One of the ransom notes from Guthrie's possible abductors demanded $6 million by 5 o'clock today. The note included a threat to Guthrie's life if the deadline isn't met. There have been no suspects named as the search for the 84-year-old enters its second week. Law enforcement officials were at her home on Sunday, and they were also seen at the home of her daughter, Annie, on late Saturday. Hillsdale College is rolling out a new campaign called Learn Like Charlie, referencing our friend Charlie Kirk, who studied the classics, the American founding, and the Bible through Hillsdale College's free online courses. Let's hear a little bit of their video touting this, cut 14.
I see him speak, I see him lead, I see
What concrete steps can I take now in order to achieve the goal of doing my part to make America great again?
You should go to Hillsdale College, America's greatest college.
Charlie, if I could learn like Charlie, if I could learn like Charlie.
So I listened to your podcast. I'm taking Hillsdale online courses right now.
That's what I'm talking about. I love it.
To lead, what should I lead? How do I set my generation free? I need to know, how do I grow like Charlie? If I
All right.
could learn like Charlie.
To find out more about the Hillsdale College campaign, visit learnlikecharlie.com. This is the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. I have a word about aches and pains. Our latest story comes from Tom in Texas. At 85, pain was keeping Tom from riding his bike and from flying small aircraft as a flight instructor. Tom was an active guy. Pain was stopping him from living his life the way he wanted to. But after taking Relief Factor, Tom tells us his lower back and hip pain are virtually gone, and even long-standing trigger finger issues have started to improve. We have used Relief Factor in the Jennings household. I was just talking to my dad over the weekend. He's decamped to Florida to play some golf. He's been on Relief Factor for a few months. When he left on his trip, the last thing he said to me is, make sure we packed the Relief Factor. I checked the trunk, and in fact, we had packed it. My encouragement to you is to try Relief Factor's 3-week quick start and see how it works. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit ReliefFactor.com. When we come back, an illegal alien who's been exposing himself for 2 decades finds a sympathetic judge. You don't want to miss this story. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us. To bring to you today. I will read you the headline. Migrant accused of exposing genitals for 2 decades whips out deportation victory. The reporter who has uncovered this admittedly strange story is named Jason Hopkins. He is an investigative journalist for the Daily Caller News Foundation. Jason joins us live here on the Scott Jennings Show. Jason, welcome in.
Hey, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
Let me make sure I have this correct, Jason. There is a person in the United States with a green card for the last couple of decades who has been arrested almost 20 times for indecent exposure, including recently, which should be enough to kick this person out. But it hasn't been so far. Please tell us about what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just the latest example of how criminal migrants are able to use the judicial system to their advantage. Basically, if you're ordered deported and you just keep fighting it, keep contesting your order, you eventually will just avoid it and get to stay in the country. This is the latest case. This deals with a Cape Verdean national. This is an island country off the coast of Africa. I've actually been tracking this guy for the past 2 years when he was first arrested by ICE back in early 2024. But to really just kind of wrap the whole thing up succinctly here, this is an individual who did arrive here legally in 2003. But since that time, he has been, as you mentioned, arrested nearly 20 times under gross open lewdness, whatnot, just all involving exposing his genitals in public, publicly masturbating in front of people over and over and over again in Boston for the past 20 years. And then finally, what happens here is under immigration law, if you are convicted twice of what's called a crime involving moral turpitude, you are deemed deportable. And in this case, he was so and considered an illegal alien at the time, and he was finally arrested by ICE. And he had been sitting in ICE detention for nearly the past 2 years. But as really most of them do, he kept this guy, Lucio Tomar, just kept contesting his deportation order. A judge ordered him deported. He contested that. He appealed to the Board of Immigration Appeals. They actually affirmed the judge's decision. He appealed it again, and this time this went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. And strangely enough, 3 judges, all of whom were actually appointed by President Biden, that's a side note, actually concluded that his actions were not a crime of moral turpitude. They used mental gymnastics there to explain why. That's something I can definitely get into it. And he was ultimately let go. And ICE has now confirmed with me that he is once again considered a lawful permanent resident, and he is back on the streets.
So let me understand something here. This person was exposing himself over 2 decades, arrested nearly 19 times. The feds had him in custody, you say, for 2 years, but he kept working the legal system. And after all of that, after all is said and done, this man with a history of exposing himself and masturbating in front of women in Boston, Massachusetts, has been set free by federal judges, is free to roam, and it has a legal status in our country?
Yes, he has been set free. ICE confirmed to me that he was released on January 26th, and he is out and about, and he is once again considered a lawful permanent resident. For those that are curious, what went down here is the court, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit here, they concluded that in Massachusetts, you can be arrested for open and gross lewdness for things that aren't necessarily that are sexual in nature. And they kind of compared his actions to like mooning oncoming traffic, maybe sunbathing in the nude. And they said, well, if you can get arrested for that, you really can't consider this to be a crime involving moral turpitude. And so that was their argument, and he is free. And now you're just wondering when he will be arrested again for the same crime, since this has happened nearly 20 times already.
Jason, we have about 10 seconds. Does the Department of Homeland Security plan to appeal this any further?
They do not. I confirmed with my ICE source that they are no longer moving forward with deportation proceedings. Now, I will add to that, though, that he could very well just be arrested again. And will it be in Massachusetts? Could it be somewhere else that could change it? And I'd also want to add, before you let me go here, his defense was paid for by the taxpayers through Massachusetts Taxpayers State Agency.
Your tax money paying to keep a migrant on the streets with a long history of exposing himself to American citizens. Jason Hopkins from the Daily Caller, thank you for weighing in today on yet another example of how hard it is to get aliens out of our country. We'll take a break. When we come back, continuing coverage of the massive D-Trans lawsuit. You don't want to miss it. Scott Jennings is here.
Scott Jennings.
It is Monday, February 9th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here. Coming up, more coverage of the D-Trans landmark lawsuit out of New York last week, the $2 million judgment. We have an expert on to discuss this further. First, though, here's something every parent and maybe even every grandparent needs to hear. More kids are being targeted online through gaming platforms, social media, and messaging apps. I assume you've seen the news about Roblox, for instance, predators invading that game. The company doing very little. Now attorneys general are having to step in. Anyway, these companies profit from screen time and engagement, and when predators slip through the cracks, families pay the price. Child Help, our friends and partners at Child Help, hear from children every day who were contacted through games and apps. Kids who were groomed, manipulated, or threatened by adults pretending to be someone else. One boy reached out through Child Help's chat hotline, terrified and ashamed he'd met an adult in an online game. That adult was demanding photos and threatening to lie to his parents if he didn't comply. Because Child Help was there for that little boy, they may well have saved his life. That's why Child Help matters. That's why your donation matters. Every $27 can help save a child from abuse, can help save a child's life. If these companies won't protect our kids, we have to do something. Donate at childhelp.org/Scott or text Child Help to 94878 and donate just $27 today. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. This past week saw one of the most closely watched legal battles over gender-affirming medical care reach a dramatic verdict that is reverberating across medical, legal, and policy circles. In Westchester County, New York, a civil jury awarded $2 million to a 22-year-old woman who underwent a double mastectomy as a teenager while identifying as transgender, but later detransitioned and then sued her providers, claiming they failed to follow accepted standards of care and secure proper informed consent. The six-figure verdict, believed to be the first U.S. detransitioner medical malpractice lawsuit to reach a jury, lays bare the intense debates over medical practices, consent, and accountability when it comes to these irreversible procedures on minors. Supporters of the ruling say it underscores the responsibility of doctors to adhere to rigorous evaluation and communication standards. To help unpack what this verdict means for patients, providers, and the future of gender-related medical litigation, I am joined by Lior Sapir, a legal scholar and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Lior covers topics related to pediatric gender medicine, education, policy, and culture. Lior, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So I want to just get your reaction to the verdict in this lawsuit. I assume you were tracking it closely. Were you surprised at the outcome? And I'd like for you to sort of project into the future. I know there are many other possible lawsuits sitting in other courtrooms across America. Do you think we're going to see a number of outcomes like this in those courtrooms as well?
It's a good question. And first of all, I was not tracking this lawsuit because it was kept under wraps. So I learned about it with the rest of the American people last week. But to answer your question, I think the impact of this lawsuit is complicated. You know, on the one hand, the case did not directly raise the question of whether the defendants, including a psychologist and a plastic surgeon, departed from the current standard of care, which is dictated by an organization called the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Nor did it raise the more fundamental question of whether that standard of care is evidence-based and trustworthy. So you know, in that sense, I think the lawsuit may have limited impact. On the other hand, though, this is the first known jury verdict in favor of a detransitioner. And when you look at the details of the case, what you immediately see is that both the psychologist and the surgeon were actually operating very consistently with the accepted standard of care, the current gender-affirming model of care as recommended by WPATH and other organizations. So, for example, you know, when Fox Varian, the plaintiff, said to her therapist at age 16 that she wants to have her breasts amputated to achieve a more masculine look, the therapist didn't think to ask her why she felt that way and to try to explore the causes of her distress and her rejection of her own body, which is a very normal experience for a teenage girl. But instead, he just took for granted that, you know, she knows who she is and she knows what she wants. And the first question that he asked her is, okay, or the first thing he said to her was, okay, let's figure out how we can help you get that procedure. And that is fully in line with how clinicians nowadays gender clinicians explain the gender-affirming model of care.
Lior, you wrote a couple of months ago about how doctors have admitted to winging it when it comes to gender medicine. What do you mean by winging it? And what does it say to you that sometimes doctors are so flippant about this when it comes to what they've done to and recommended to these minors?
Yeah, so this was an article that I wrote for the Free Press based on videos from the annual conferences of WPATH, which is, you know, as I pointed out, it's the leading organization promoting gender transition in both minors and adults. And it's the organization that has written the standard of care that is widely adopted across U.S. healthcare settings. These videos were obtained through legal discovery in a lawsuit in Alabama, from internal communications at WPATH, and WPATH fought tooth and nail to prevent Alabama from getting them and publishing them. But there's a number of very disturbing revelations in those videos, which the viewers can read about in my Free Press article. One of them was a doctor admitting on camera that when it comes to providing hormonal treatments to young patients, this is how she put it: we're all just winging it. And her colleagues who were sitting on the panel nodded in agreement. And this was, maybe not that surprising to those of us who follow this area. But this confession was made in a conference in which they thought they were only talking to their colleagues. They did not realize that, the wider public and the wider medical community would one day have access to these videos. So this is a pretty common pattern, Scott, that gender clinicians say one thing privately when talking to colleagues and another thing publicly when speaking at, in legislative hearings or, TV shows.
Give us an idea of how you view the current policy environment for these sorts of procedures on minors. Obviously, we recently saw an announcement from RFK Jr., the Secretary of HHS, about not providing funding to hospitals for this. You've seen some states crack down on this. You've seen other areas, mostly run by Democrats, that are trying to keep it alive. Give me you track it sort of macro nationally. Give me your overview of the policy environment. Do you believe we have sort of gone over the top of the hill here where this is ultimately going to be phased out, or do you think we're going to continue to see pockets of places in the United States where minors are in fact going to be mutilated, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, the way I see it is that, we've definitely turned a corner. There have been a number of very important events in recent years, including the publication of the Cass Review in the United Kingdom, lawsuits, the Supreme Court weighing in and saying that imposing age minimums does not violate constitutional rights. So there have been a number of very landmark events in recent years that I think strengthened the conviction that these procedures are eventually going to be on their way out. But there's a long fight within the medical community ahead of us. And I think we're just starting to see the first manifestations of that. As you know, last week, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, which is the largest medical group representing surgeons in the United States, came out with a statement, a very carefully crafted statement that cited extensive literature and referenced basic principles of bioethics. And they basically said what health authorities in a number of European countries, very progressive European countries, have said, which is there's no good evidence to support these procedures. By the way, it's not just surgeries that they were talking about. They were also talking about puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. I think importantly, the ASPS also said that the principle of autonomy cannot justify these procedures because autonomy simply means that patients have the right to refuse treatments that are appropriately offered to them. They don't have a right to demand treatments that are inappropriate, meaning not based on good evidence. So I think you're starting to see more than a crack or two in the dam that has been holding back reform in this area. And I think that's a very positive thing.
Something about the case in New York that has stuck with me. I interviewed a reporter last week who had been tracking the case and had looked at all the transcripts and evidence from the case. And one of the things that came out in the trial, Lior, is that the girl's mother had said she opposed the surgery initially, but had been told by the psychologist in the case that if she didn't ultimately consent, that her daughter would kill herself. And so she felt like she had no choice but to consent to something that she strongly opposed. I have thought about that all weekend long as I reflected on my interview with that journalist. It just made me wonder what kind of conversations like that are going on out there between doctors and parents who, on the one hand, are hearing things from their kids that they probably instinctively know they should resist. But then on the other hand, you've got a doctor telling you something as stark as if you make decision A, it will lead to a suicide. In your work and research, do you believe that these kinds of conversations where you effectively have doctors pressuring parents fairly common?
It is common, unfortunately, and I would, refer viewers who are interested in understanding the science of this question to the Department of Health and Human Services report, Treatment for Pediatric Gender Dysphoria, that was published in its final peer-reviewed version in November. And full disclosure, I was one of the co-authors of that report. But the bottom line is, the suicide narrative that you just presented has become very common in this field. We have many, many examples of it. And it's not only not based on any evidence, it's actually dangerous, Scott, because suicide is a socially contagious behavior. And when medical authorities falsely tell young people, vulnerable young people with numerous mental health comorbidities, that the natural expectation or the natural outcome of them not receiving life-altering drugs and surgeries is that they're going to kill themselves, it can very easily become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we know from the research is that suicide is slightly elevated among kids who have gender dysphoria relative to kids who do not. But the risk of suicide is still very, very low. In fact, the ACLU itself admitted it in the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. So suicide remains a very rare event, fortunately. And what explains the elevated risk of both suicide and suicidal ideation, meaning thoughts of suicide or plans for suicide, are the mental health, the coexisting mental health challenges that are very common among these distressed adolescents. Anxiety, depression, autism is very common, ADHD is very common. And so the only study that actually tried to parse out whether the gender issues themselves are causing elevated risk or these other comorbid issues found that it was the comorbid issues that were responsible.
Lior Sapir, a legal scholar and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, thanks for your insights today on this important topic. We'll take a break, and when we come back, uncovering massive Medicaid fraud in Oregon. We'll have a live report. My friend Mark Hemingway on the phone. Oh, do we have Mark? We do. Fantastic. I want to tell you about a story in Portland, Oregon. Let me just go down the list of things that you'll hear. Tren de Aragua kidnapping a woman, human trafficking, Tren de Aragua running a fake addiction recovery center, which is actually a drug den that turned out to be a Medicaid scam, and money going overseas. It sounds crazy, but it's all true. Mark Hemingway from Real Clear Investigations is here. Mark, thanks for joining us on the Scott Jennings Show. What in the world is going on in Portland, Oregon?
Well, that story you just mentioned is pretty staggering. Obviously we've been hearing about Medicaid fraud in Minneapolis and other cities, but in this case we had a situation here where a member of Tren de Agua, along with someone else who's still at large, by the way, kidnapped a woman and put a power drill through her hand to get her to give up her financial information. They robbed her. They shot her. They left her on the side of a road in rural Washington State, but somehow the woman survived. The cops identified the Tren de Agua member that did this, and they traced him to a house in the suburbs of Portland. This house had a litany of police complaints about, parties and drugs and underage women. And it turned out this same address was also being listed as part of a Medicaid recovery center called Uplifting Journey that had multiple properties around the city. And this Uplifting Journey organization in Portland was tied in with a couple of men down in Arizona who'd been indicted for $60 million in Medicare fraud down there. And they were laundering all that money through Rwanda, and they might be tied into other Medicaid fraud elsewhere. But that's just, one sign of Portland, Oregon's dysfunction.
Mark, I was reading your story and took note that you're a third-generation Oregonian who has lived in Portland. People used to think of this city as being cool and fun and hip and so on and so forth. What happened to Portland? Because it just sounds, frankly, awful now.
Well, it's really remarkable. I mean, right now, Portland, Oregon has the second highest crime rate of any city in America after Memphis, Tennessee. Portland, Oregon. It did not used to be like this at all. I mean, my mother was raised in Portland in the 1950s. I mean, it was like the ideal, American middle-class city. But really what has happened here is, literally just a couple of decades of progressive governance. The Portland, quickly acquired a reputation for being soft on crime. In 2020, the big thing was there was a statewide initiative that legalized, it decriminalized hard drugs in the state. So if you were literally caught smoking fentanyl or injecting heroin in public, they would give you what was the equivalent of a traffic ticket. They couldn't even arrest you. And that stayed on the books for years, and it attracted, crazy homeless vagrants, from all over the country. They call it, drug tourism. And they eventually repealed it after a few years, but, the city was already declining. But this, foray into drug legalization and other things just made things, horrendous. And you combine that with, again, the soft on crime situation. I mentioned in the piece that there was a story about one woman who was arrested 9 times for car theft in the same year and didn't spend a day in jail. I mean, it's just the progressives in Portland, Oregon, and similar cities, they're just foursquare against any sort of public order. There's no other way to describe it.
Mark, is this a cautionary tale? We see Democrat governors and mayors in other cities trying to move toward this complete soft-on-crime agenda, letting violent people out of jail over and over again, permissive drug culture. Is this their future if they don't get off that trail now?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, what's interesting about Portland and Seattle as well is, both of these cities are basket cases. But unlike a lot of other cities that are struggling right now, these are both cities that were barely cities 100 years ago. Portland, Oregon is the whitest major city in America, so it has no, civil rights legacy of oppression or anything like that. This is, you look at what's gone on in Portland, Oregon, and you look at how this happened in such a short amount of time. 20 years ago, it was a relatively safe, a prosperous city, and now it's a complete basket case. Not only is the crime through the roof, it's the highest commercial real estate vacancy rate of any city in America. Yeah. Absolutely, no one wants to open up a business downtown. The largest office building in downtown Portland sold for $550 million in 2015. Last year, it sold for $45 million. I mean, it's just I cannot. It's literally one city is dragging the entire state down.
Mark Hemingway with Real Clear Investigations. Look at his deep dive on Portland. Eye-popping details. Hour number 1's in the books. Hour number 2 after this. It's Scott. February 9th, Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings here on Salem. Thank you for joining us. If you've been paying attention to the Olympics, and I have been, thanks to official Scott Jennings show curling correspondent Ian, who is sitting mere feet away from me, he says Team USA is moving on to the gold medal match in curling. Ian, who did we defeat? Italy? We've defeated Italy, and now who do we play? Sweden. The United States will take on Sweden for the gold. Of all the Winter Olympic sports, this appears to be the one that I would have the most chance of possibly approaching competing in if, the radio political punditry business doesn't work out. So we'll keep that in the back of our minds. Ian, how are we doing on the Olympics otherwise? Are we winning any medal? We won, what's her name, Breezy.
We have 2 gold medals right now.
2 gold medals, Ian says. And even though Lindsey Vonn suffered a terrible crash, which, by the way, I have to say, Lindsey, with the torn ACL, I don't know if it had anything to do with the crash or not. It seemed a little predictable that wasn't going to work out. But then we had Breezy win the gold in the same event, so that was good. I don't know. Kaylee, what? Figure skating?
Figure skating team event. We took the gold.
We took the gold in the figure skating team event?
We did.
No kidding. How about that? Look at that. All your Olympic coverage here on the Scott Jennings Show. All right, thank you both. Let's get back to politics. I want to talk about something today that should not be controversial in a healthy democracy, and that is who gets to vote in American elections. Republicans in Congress are pushing legislation called the Save America Act. Remember that name, SAVE, because that's exactly what it does. It safeguards American voting eligibility by requiring voter ID and proof of citizenship to register in federal elections. That's it. There's no tricks here, no suppression, just verification. And for supporting this common sense idea, Democrats are completely melting down. Let's listen to Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the U.S. House, absolutely malfunction over the weekend on CNN. Here's cut 6.
A Pew poll from a few months ago showed 83% of Americans, including 71% of your fellow Democrats, support requiring an ID to vote. Why are they wrong?
I haven't said that they're wrong. What Republicans are trying to do is to engage in clear and blatant voter suppression. They know that if there's a free and fair election in November, they're going to lose.
More talking points, false talking points from the Democrats. You've also heard Chuck Schumer repeatedly call voter ID Jim Crow 2.0, even though 3/4 of black voters think you should show an ID to vote. It's right there in the polling. House Democrat Jamie Raskin says married women are too stupid to figure out how to vote once they get hitched. That's actually what he believes. Take a listen to cut 5.
What's wrong with the SAVE Act? What's wrong with it is that it might violate the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote, because you've got to show that all of your different IDs match. So if you're a woman who's gotten married and you've changed your name to your husband's name, but so now your current name is different from your name at birth, now you've got to go ahead and document that.
Married women of America, understand something, that Jamie Raskin and the rest of the Democratic Party literally think you are too stupid to figure out how to vote because you got married. That is how little the supposed party of women thinks of you. Here's California Senator Adam Schiff. Can't do anything other than just repeat the same old talking points. Here's cut 3.
71% of Democrats favor requiring photo ID. Is that something that you can support? And if not, why not?
It's still going to be something, Jonathan. it's still going to be something that disenfranchises people that don't have the proper real ID, driver's license ID, that don't have the ID necessary to vote, even though they are citizens.
None of them will answer the simplest question imaginable. Should only U.S. citizens vote in U.S. elections? Because once you say yes, their argument collapses. Here's the reality that Democrats don't want to admit. Voter ID is overwhelmingly popular with the American people. Republicans, independents, Democrats, black voters, Hispanic voters, white voters, men, women. Everybody is for it. 83% of Americans want voter ID. So when Democrats say voter ID is Jim Crow 2.0, they're going against another 80-20 issue in America, and they're going against African-American voters, they're going against Hispanic voters, and they're essentially arguing that most Americans are racist. It's really sort of offensive if you ask me, dishonest and elitist. Jim Crow was about excluding people because of race. Voter ID is about including only eligible voters. Why do we need the SAVE Act? This is not a hypothetical question. In Alabama, state officials recently discovered thousands of illegal aliens who had somehow registered to vote. Thousands of illegal aliens on the voter rolls. Take a listen to this news story. Cut 15.
3,000 registered voters in Alabama just got booted from the state voter rolls. That's after the Secretary of State, Wes Allen, ordered the removal of all non-citizens who were registered. But how did non-citizens get registered in the first place? WAFF 48's Nick Ballinger spoke to the Secretary of State to get to the bottom of this story. Nick?
Yeah, Margot, when I asked Secretary Allen how these people got registered to vote in the first place, he couldn't give me a clear answer just yet, saying it was still being investigated. But when he gave me a breakdown of how many there were in each county, the numbers were glaring. This is a list from Secretary of State Wes Allen of how many non-citizens were registered to vote in our counties. The state found 3,251 people. 742 of them were from North Alabama.
We got the information. We cross-checked it against our centralized data file here in the state of Alabama and found those 3,200 individuals.
The information he's talking about are people with alien registration numbers. Those are issued to immigrants who intend to live in this country permanently and have already applied for a green card. However, you're not eligible to vote with just an alien identification number. When I asked Allen how 3,000 plus were able to register in the first place, he couldn't give me the answer.
But it's our belief that only American citizens should be allowed to vote. Non-citizens, whether they're legal or illegal immigrants, cannot register to vote. It's a federal offense.
To vote.
Now, Democrats would respond and say, well, just because they were registered doesn't mean they voted. But here's the point. If thousands of ineligible people are registered to vote, doesn't that tell you that the system is broken? The Save America Act says verify citizenship, require ID to vote, clean up the voter rolls, and prevent problems before elections, not after. That's not voter suppression. That's basic system maintenance. Now let's talk a little about hypocrisy, because this is where Democrats completely give themselves away. Let's meet Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia. Jon Ossoff, like most Democrats, opposes voter ID. He opposes the Save America Act. He says ID requirements are discriminatory. But at his own campaign events, new reporting has revealed, Jon Ossoff requires government-issued photo ID to get inside. Let that sink in. You need ID to hear Jon Ossoff speak, but Jon Ossoff says you don't need ID to show up and vote? If ID is good enough to protect Jon Ossoff's campaign events, isn't it good enough to protect American elections? This tells you everything, folks. This isn't about racism or suppression or anything else. It's about power. Democrats don't oppose voter ID because it's unfair. They oppose it because it threatens an electoral advantage built on chaos, confusion, and sloppy systems. Save America Act should pass today. It's common sense, and the American people know it. This is Scott Jennings on Salem. When we come back, some troubling, violent comments by Democrats made over the weekend. Don't miss this. Stay with us.
Times best-selling author and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
It is Monday, February 9th. Common sense for the American people. A little bit of breaking news into the show. The United States said in an advisory on Monday, this is the U.S. Department of Transportation, that American-flagged ships should be careful going through the Strait of Hormuz and stay as far away from Iranian territory as possible. This advisory comes after Iranian naval forces reportedly harassed a U.S.-flagged vessel last week. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, is a major route for shipping in the Middle East. The Department of Transportation is worried about Iranian forces trying to board U.S. vessels, and we're still waiting to see what will come of the diplomatic chats that are happening, the mediated chats between the United States and Iran. The United States has a huge military buildup in the region. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. Wanted to share a couple of clips with you today. It's rather bad news because I actually think these comments that I'm going to share with you should raise up the hair on the back of your neck. Let me start in Texas. The Democrats in Texas, by the way, whether they are running for the Senate there or occupying seats of leadership in the state house, are particularly awful. And I'm going to play a clip for you, and you tell me. When I heard it, I thought, this man is trying to incite violence against a huge number of Americans. This man is named Gene Wu. He is the minority leader of the Texas House of Representatives, so he is an elected official who has risen up to a position of leadership in his party. And he decided to talk this weekend about how everyone who isn't white in America should join together and overthrow the country. Here's cut 2.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country now. We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone and to make things fair. But the problem is our communities are divided. They're completely divided.
Listen to the language that Gene Wu uses. The language of oppressor and oppressed. That is the modern liberal thinking, by the way. If you can only be in one of two groups. You're either oppressed or you're the oppressor. And in Gene Wu, elected Democrat leader, in his worldview, all white people are oppressors and therefore must be overthrown somehow. Now, interestingly, Wu's parents fled communist China when he was just 4 years old under the threats of Mao and the communists. His parents found a better life. Where? In America. Let's now listen to Bakari Sellers, former state representative from South Carolina, someone that I know because we worked together on CNN. He appeared on a talk show and said some unfortunate things about, quote, fumigating MAGA out of America. Let's listen to cut number 1.
You know, Joe Biden was somewhat of a bridge. He was supposed to be a bridge or a palate cleanser or somebody who morally and ethically was antithetical to who Donald Trump was. You know, Uncle Joe was the nice guy, older white guy, comes in and you want to eat ice cream with him, right? Well, I think what that episode in our country's history showed us is that we really need some fumigation, right? We need a exorcism, for lack of a better term. We need a more aggressive approach to go in and surgically remove the cancer that is the Donald Trump and MAGA movement.
Fumigation, exorcism, removing the cancer. Let's just deal with the fumigation comment for a moment. I'm sure more than a handful of our Jewish brothers and sisters would raise an eyebrow at that. The idea that exorcism would be required to change the hearts and minds of 77 million Americans who voted Republican in the last presidential election. Crazy. Cancer, one of the two major political parties in this country, a cancer that needs to be removed? This is rather disgusting rhetoric. Of course, it's often, when you hear these kinds of things, It's projection, is it not? This is often what the left accuses the right of saying, of being nasty and violent in its rhetoric. But I can't think of anything nastier or more violent, frankly, than using the terms fumigation, exorcism, or cancer removal, or the idea that all non-white people in the United States must band together to throw off the yoke of their oppressors. Pretty extreme stuff from the left, if you ask me. When we come back, my friend Emily Austin is here. She was at the Grammys the other day with Billie Eilish. It's an interesting story. You'll want to hear it. Salem, really excited to bring you this next conversation. Emily Austin is here. She is an American journalist, a very popular social media influencer, and an independent sports broadcaster. She is the host of the Emily Austin Show. You can find her on the X platform at Emily R. Austin. Emily, thank you for joining us here. You have had some interesting adventures lately, and I look forward to discussing it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's so good to be here.
Thank you. Yes, Emily, you and I have shared the set at CNN on a couple of occasions and have always been impressed with your commentary. Let me go back a few days and talk to you about the Grammys. You were at the Grammys the night that Billie Eilish decided to say the bit about stolen land. Nobody's illegal on stolen land. And you ended up with a little bit of a viral moment because you would not go along with the crowd. You had the crowd there standing up and clapping, everybody cheering on this anti-ICE and all this stolen land business. And you said no, because you were the only person in the room with any common sense. Tell us what that was like.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, for starters, I say this a lot and it receives scrutiny because maybe it comes off like ignorant or maybe too harsh. But I say if I disagree with you, but you say it with your chest and you have a backbone, at least I can respect the integrity that you have. When I came to the Grammys with my American flag diamond clutch, walking in, so many people came up to me. They whispered to me like, oh my God, we love your bag. But they were almost fearful that God forbid it came out that they support the United States of America, they'd receive some sort of backlash. But then when Billie Eilish said F ICE or no one's illegal on stolen land, like sheep, everyone just stood up and was roaring like she had just dropped the smartest line you'd ever heard. Me and my mother, my poor mother who's getting bullied online now, we both sat and we were like, yeah, we love law enforcement. We love America. And everyone was looking at us like in pure and utter disgust. And I would do it all over again, except now, Scott, the funniest part is the people who preach love and inclusivity are now telling me every single 5 seconds on Instagram to go die, to choke, to kill myself. They hope ICE rapes me, that I support pedophiles, and are writing me the most vile things I've ever seen in my life.
Well, you showed quite a bit of courage by making a stand there at the Grammys. You know, you run in these circles and I don't, and I suspect a lot of our listeners want to know this, and you alluded to it, but just to be clear, you had a few people whispering to you, oh, I love your bag, I love the American flag. Maybe they were whispering to you, hey, I agree with you. But when push comes to shove, it's your opinion that most of the folks out in Hollywood just don't have enough backbone to stand up for common sense. They feel like for professional reasons they have to go along with the crowd, even when the crowd is objectively stupid.
It's solely for professional reasons. I have to believe this, and it helps me sleep better at night, that the people who utilize these security services, whether it's private security, the police, or, you know, relying on people like ICE to keep criminals out of the country, that they'd show a sense of appreciation for them. And the truth is, privately, they do. But that's not enough in a world full of sheep that follow, you know, the celebrities, that follow the leaders. You need to be the leader. There are no leaders anymore. There's Billie Eilish, who's one being a mouthpiece for the sheep. So the few people that came to me in private, whether it was at the Grammys or the after parties, were very, very, you know, I'm going to protect their identities, but some of the most famous people that all these young people look up to, some of the most famous music executives, the decision makers, they were the ones coming to me and they're like, you were the girl with the American flag. God bless you. And I'm just like, who would have thought, you know? And I actually debated with one of them. He had said to me, how do we raise our kids to be like you? I said, for starters, you need to be proud and vocal. And second, move out of LA. And it was funny, but it was serious, where I'm like, how could you want your kids to act a certain way if you don't act a certain way? And it was kind of sad.
In the wake of the Billie Eilish comments, it seemed to me, Emily, that she suffered a fairly significant negative cycle of public relations. I mean, she was dragged online significantly. She got a ton of negative attention. Do you think that someone like Billie Eilish sees this whole engagement as a mistake or as a negative experience, or do you think she sees it as a net positive to her for having done and said what she said?
I think Billie right now is on the phone with whoever told her to say that and is asking them, what did I say? Because I don't believe she thought of that by herself. I don't believe any of these artists do enough critical thinking individually. They say whatever their PR or agent or manager is instructing them to say. She clearly must have read that somewhere because, based on the scrutiny, usually you come out, you make a statement, you defend what you said, or you apologize. She's done neither because she's likely confused. Now, the most ironic part about Billie Eilish, of all people, saying this is no one's illegal on stolen land, yet she lives on specifically Native American stolen land, who have now released a statement. And secondly, Billie Eilish has a restraining order on a criminal who broke into her home. But if you don't believe in private property because we're all on stolen land, why would you call 911, who you disrespect, to come save you from this person who's on your land that you stole as well?
Emily, how does it work in Hollywood when someone like Billie Eilish is going to make a speech at a major event like the Grammys? Do they have advisors that tell them, oh, here's the latest cultural hot button that you should hit? Or do they often just see things in their own social media feeds and sort of unvetted run up to the stage and say it without thinking about it? What's the most common way that these Hollywood celebrities wind up saying the dumbest things?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I spoke about this, but it's really not getting enough attention. At the Grammys, before the red carpet, there was a woman handing out Ice Out pins. So people who showed up with no political statements were encouraged to put these pins on before all the photographers had a chance to take a picture of you. So clearly this was an initiative that was pre-planned. Billie's case, what I'd imagine happened is that she has, you have like a small team around you 24/7 at all times. One person must be extremely woke, probably chirp something in her ear about, if you win, make sure you say something to give ICE a taste of their own medicine, which ICE cannot care less what Billie Eilish thinks, nor does anyone, honestly. And the illegal on stolen land, she must have read that online because that wasn't even a narrative that's going around.
All right, that voice you're hearing today is Emily Austin, an American journalist, a social media influencer, and also an independent sports broadcaster. She's the host of the Emily Austin Show, and my friend, we've debated together on CNN a time or two. You can find her on the X platform at Emily R. Austin. I want to shift gears to another celebrity, Emily, that is making waves. I speak of Bad Bunny, who appeared at the Super Bowl halftime show last night. A lot of conservatives were outraged when the NFL decided to do the halftime show with Bad Bunny. And in fact, it prompted Turning Point USA to have their own halftime show with Kid Rock and other musicians. So I have to ask, as our official Hollywood correspondent of the Scott Jennings Show, what was your impression of Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl last night?
All right, conservatives, close your ears for a brief moment. Scott, I loved it. I thought it was incredible. I will preface by saying I am a fan of his music. Do I understand more than 10% of the lyrics? No. Do I vibe to the music and it makes my body move nicely? Absolutely. I don't think you need to understand the words to acknowledge that it has a good beat and it has good rhythm. I thought the performance itself was incredible. There was hot women dancing on the field. There's no transgender ideology. There was nothing woke about it. He embraced multiple cultures, including the United States. He made it clear to say, God bless the USA. He brought out an American flag at the end. Yes, accommodated by multiple Latin American flags, but I don't see a problem with that. And I'll also add, he had every opportunity to make this political, and he chose not to. However, with the utmost respect to Turning Point, and I adore the work that they do, and it's God's good work, what they did was divisive because it was a moment of unity, and he held up beautiful signs on the billboards that said the only thing stronger than hate is love. And Turning Point and people like Jake Paul, who later apologized for it, We're like, nobody watched this garbage. Let's turn off the TVs and let's show them. Nobody showed anyone anything. And the fact that we're having a cultural civil war in the United States over one of the best performing artists in the US, 3-time Grammy winning artist, is silly. We have bigger battles to fight. Our country, the city I'm in right now, New York's falling apart. And we're like, I don't like that he's saying in Spanish. Well, 50 million Americans speak Spanish, so get over it.
Emily, you raised my next topic, which is New York City. We're now a little over a month into the new mayor, Mamdani, and you are Jewish. You're an outspoken defender of the Jewish people, and you and I have debated these issues with folks on CNN on a few occasions. There are a lot of people in New York City who believe they're getting exactly what they thought they were going to get with Mamdani, which is an administration that is tilted heavily against Jewish people. How do you feel about Mamdani a little over a month in as someone who has your proclivities and political views on these matters?
You know, when I break it down, here's how I think of it. Mamdani himself, I think, is a fool. I don't think he's so, smart to be able to screw up the city as well as he could. What I don't like about Mamdani is that he enables extremist, regular citizens of Manhattan, meaning, or the 5 boroughs, I could say. I focus on New York City. The people who voted for him are the woke left. They're the extremists. They're the pro-Hamas crowd. They're the disrespect law enforcement crowd. And they're the ones who now feel empowered over the fact that Mamdani is the mayor. And I'm not even talking policy right now. I'm just talking social effect. Right. They walk around knowing that they're almost like they get a jail out of free pass because Mamdani is the mayor. And that's what frightens me, because the mayor, his hands are ultimately tied by the governor, who is also a dumb idiot, Governor Hochul. So my problem's more with the governor, but socially, Zoran is empowering this group that has no business being empowered, the lowest IQ of them all, but more importantly, the crowd who basically are violent. And that scares me. Like, I was just on the phone with my friend before we came on Zoom. I was grabbing my matcha, and I said, why do I feel like if I don't look over my shoulder, I'm just going to get stabbed? Like, that's how I feel walking around Manhattan. And I travel a lot to many, many countries and cities, and I don't feel that way anywhere else besides downtown LA.
Yeah, I think a lot of Jewish people in New York feel the same way you do, that just being out in the city, being out on the street, they're more in danger now than they were before Mamdani became mayor. Emily, I have to tell you, I think you're one of the most interesting cultural influencers out there. It's why I invited you on the show today. I'm very proud to know you. I follow you on X at Emily R. Austin. Tell our listeners how they can follow the Emily Austin Show and follow you on the other platforms.
Thank you so much, Scott. On Instagram, I'm at emily.austin. On YouTube, Emily Austin Network. Back to Instagram, Emily Austin Show. X, Emily Austin Show. Fortunately, Scott, I've done a good job outranking any other Emily Austin. So just Google it. And by the way, it was tough. It was tough.
I know. It must have been, but you're very talented, so I can see why you pulled it off. Emily Austin, you're a great guest. We'll have you back soon here on the Scott Jennings Show. A quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. A new story is here. This one from Keith in Washington, an extremely active guy, former college athlete, martial arts instructor, a guy that was teaching multiple classes a day, very active. But over time, his body was wearing down, and he was having some knee pain and neck pain. He gets on Relief Factor. Voila! Knee pain disappears. Neck pain dropping significantly. He was able to keep training and earn his black belt. One of countless stories that we're getting here at the Scott Jennings Show that proves to me that Relief Factor might be right for you. If you'd like to move easier, stay active, and not let aches and pains control your life, try the 3-week quick start. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit ReliefFactor.com and let us see if we can get you out of pain. More after this. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here on Salem. That lawmakers on Capitol Hill are able to go over to the Department of Justice and view the unredacted Epstein files. I expect some of them will be doing that Thomas Massey of Kentucky says he will. And I believe Jamie Raskin, congressman from Maryland, may have just come out from looking at the file. So as you think about the news for the rest of the day and tomorrow, you'll be getting some legislative reaction to seeing these files. We do have some other crazy news out of the House of Representatives. You've heard of this woman, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She's from Detroit. It has been exposed in a new report from a nonpartisan nonprofit that she may have close ties to global terrorism. The study was done by the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism. They sponsored the report, and they found that Tlaib, among other things, publicly praised individuals who are responsible for terrorism, spoke at events which featured convicted terrorists, and made numerous and frequent anti-Semitic comments and statements. And it goes deeper than that. Between 2020 and 2025, her campaign gave over $600,000 to a firm that has deep connections to CAIR, C-A-I-R, for the uninitiated. C-A-I-R is a group that pushes Sharia law in America. She's also donated to the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights and the Alliance for Global Justice, which both have direct ties to Hamas. She's also donated to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. What is the PFLP? It is a militant, Marxist, Leninist, Palestinian organization known for hijacking numerous planes. And Tlaib, by the way, has spoken at their events and been on stage with their members before. Recently in Dearborn, Michigan, a mob was openly chanting, "Death to America." How did Rashida Tlaib react when she was asked to condemn that? Well, let's hear cut 8.
Congresswoman Tlaib,
Fox News. I don't talk to Fox News.
At a rally in your district, people were chanting "Death to America." Do you condemn?
I talk to Fox News.
But do you condemn chants of "Death to America"?
I don't talk to people that use racist tropes.
Why can't you just say whether or not you condemn people chanting "Death to America"? Why are you afraid to talk to Fox?
Fox News is not listen, using racist tropes towards my community is what Fox News is about, and I don't talk to Fox News.
Is "Death to America" racist?
Fox News.
Is chanting "Death to America" racist?
I'm talking about your guys' racist tropes. You know, you guys know exactly what you do. I know you're Islamophobic, but you guys got to go deal with it on your own self. You're not going to use me.
That's the Democratic playbook, folks. Deflect, deny, Islamophobic, xenophobic, racist, but never really answers the question. Is chanting "Death to America" acceptable in America? Is this the kind of behavior we want to tolerate? And furthermore, do we want to tolerate congressional representatives who are actively undermining America? We have evidence from this report that a sitting member of Congress is closely aligned with these groups who are tied to terrorism in the Middle East. At worst, she's just a cheerleader standing alongside them. It is sick. There are so many elements on the left who are like Rashida Tlaib, and they all can contribute to a politics that is openly antagonistic to our own country, antagonistic in a way that tells us they believe our country should be torn down. I wouldn't tolerate this. I would call it out, and I would stand up against those who are openly and proudly calling for the destruction of our country. We have to combat this here and now. And it may be time for congressional investigations into people who are sitting members of Congress but are having affiliations with organizations that are adamantly opposed to the existence of the United States of America. Before we close out this hour, I want to personally invite you to join me, along with Salem's legend, Mike Gallagher, for what is going to be a wonderful week, the Gulf of America cruise. Mark your calendars, November 14th through the 21st of this year. Right after the election, you'll get on a ship and we'll talk about it. Reserve your cabin today. Text the word cruise to 94878. Text cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. It is a good deal. It is a luxury ship. The food is good. The entertainment is good. The destinations are good. The water is blue. And you get Gallagher and Jennings for a week to talk about all of the issues facing our country. It'll be fun. I hope to see you there. We're done for the day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Thanks for listening.